My humble salutations at the divine lotus feet of Bhagavan Shri Sathya Sai Babaji and Sairam to you all, my dear brothers and sisters. It is a great pleasure that I am able to present to you all today a dynamic speaker, a speaker par excellence, Dr. Sai Giridhar Sairam ji, who has spent his entire life in the divine proximity of Bhagavan Baba, who has dedicated his entire life to Swami. A couple of words about him. He was born to a pious couple, Srimati Chitra Sairam and Shri N.R. Sairam from Chennai. When he was around the age of 15 to 16 years of age, he joined Sri Sathya Sai Higher Secondary School, that was 1999, in class 11. After completing school, in 2004, he completed Bachelor of Science in Chemistry in 2006, Master of Science in Chemistry in 2008, Master of Philosophy, and in 2017 he completed a PhD in Clinical Biochemistry on the topic, the early detection of heart disease in Asian Indians. He has over a decade of experience as a lecturer in Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning for awareness classes. Awareness of what? Awareness classes of various topics related to Indian scriptures, Indian culture and spirituality as a whole, all based on Swami's divine life, Swami's work, Swami's teaching to both undergraduate and postgraduate students of the institute. And currently, he is serving as a resident fellow in the Sri Sathya Sai Center for Human Values. He received the prestigious Culture Champion Award from Divine Hand, both in his undergraduate and postgraduate in 2003 and 2005. Dr. Sai Giridhar Sairam had many wonderful and blessed moments in his life with Bhagavan Shri Sathya Sai Babaji. Oh yes. When I was looking at his profile, I felt Lord Brahma had written his fortune with a golden pen. I was admiring his fortune. Oh my God. Wow. He has studied over a decade in Swami's institution. And not only that, when he was an infant, Swami performed in Namakara and later on Akshaya Abhyasa as well in his childhood. A lot of people are aware about Namakara. Namakara is a Sanskār whose main purpose is to provide an identity to an individual. It is the initiation of the recently born child into the wider world by giving him or her a name which the society shall recognize and interact. What about Akshaya Abhyasam? Akshaya means alphabet, Abhyasam means practice. Akshaya Abhyasam is a Sanskrit word meaning initiation of education to a child by his parent and guru on an auspicious day. This is also known as Vidya Arambam. Vidya means knowledge, education, and Arambam means beginning. It's a traditional religious function in which the child is given initiation of education so that the child is ready to receive the formal education. And this ritual involves goddess Saraswati puja. And guess what? Bhagavan Shri Sathya Sai Baba, the avatar of Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, the avatar of Durga, Lakshmi, Saraswati, had initiated in Akshabhyasam to him. What a fortune! Dr. Sai Giridhar Sairam was chosen by Swami to accompany him for the Ati Rudra Mahayagna performed in Chennai in 2007 and also had the golden chance of speaking in the presence of Bhagavan himself. He was one of the chosen students to be with Swami in Kodaikanal trip in 2007 as well. Dr. Sai Giridhar Sairam has participated in many dramas staged in Swami's physical presence. He had given many talks, especially the talk of par excellence during the occasion of Prashanthi Vidwan Mahasabha. At present, he is working on an in-depth study of human values of Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prem, Ahimsa, the 5 values, based on the teaching of Bhagavan Shri Sathya Sai Baba and the worldviews. Now coming to the topic for tonight. The theme for tonight's talk is integrating practical spirituality in personal and professional life. But why this topic? Life is full of challenges and you all know that. Some people too seem to meet every challenge with success, with confidence. Others struggle to overcome even one challenge in life. Challenges may arise when your work culture does not incorporate spirituality. And you all know about that. We all experience that at work. So how do you follow Swami at this juncture? I think this is the topic for each one of us. How do we handle ourselves in such situations? Dr. Sai Giridhar Sairam has helped many to integrate practical spirituality, ethics, and morality for the upliftment of the quality of daily life, personal and professional, of course, through the fundamental character building. And he specializes in that. Today, we would be exploring practical spirituality in daily life through a framework that emerges from Swami's teachings, namely 1. Chamatkār, that is miracles, 2. Sanskār, that is culture, 3. Parōpakār, that is service, and the 4. Sākṣātkār, that is realization. Without any further delay, I would like to invite Dr. Sai Giridhar ji to take over the session from here. Please welcome Dr. Sai Giridhar Sairam.
Om Shri Sairam, offering our most loving and reverential salutations at the divine lotus feet of our beloved Bhagavan Shri Sathya Sai Baba. My loving Sairams to all the devotees in New Zealand. It is indeed a wonderful opportunity and a great honor to speak to devotees of Swami. In this satsang, we will be looking at various wonderful aspects of practical spirituality that Bhagavan has initiated all of us into. Whether we are aware or not, Swami's teachings are deeply grounded, at the same time aimed right at the goal of human birth, which is the realization of divinity inherent in humanity. Because of this unique combination that Swami's teachings is both grounded, at the same time it is aimed at the highest human possibility, it is important for us to explore through various steps and methods that Bhagavan has given us to see how we can make this a living reality in our life. We'll commence today's satsang with a beautiful poem that Bhagavan himself sang when a devotee asked Swami who he really is. This devotee is none other than Shri Kasturi ji, who is the biographer of Swami and also the translator of Swami's discourses at one time. He was so overwhelmed by Swami's presence that he asked Swami, "Swami, who are you?" And Bhagavan very spontaneously replied thus. Swami said, "Sarvarupadharam Shantam Sarvanamadharam Shivam Satchitananda Advaitam Satchitananda Advaitam Satyam Shivam Sundaram Sarvarupadharam Shantam." Bhagavan declared that he is the one who has assumed all the forms in the entire creation, and yet he is the unassuming substratum of the creation. Shantam. Sarvanamadharam Shivam. Every form goes with a name, isn't it? Like we have, say, this, which is a phone. The form is of a phone and it goes with the name phone. In the same way, every single thing around us, including our own body, is a form that goes with a name. Bhagavan declared that when all the forms are his own, all the names therefore are his as well, and therefore all your names are auspicious. Sarvanamadharam Shivam Satchitanandam Advaitam. While Swami pervades this entire creation of immense multiplicity and diversity, Swami, in essence, is only one and one alone. Advaitam. He is not two, he is only one. And his true name and nature, as declared by himself, is that of Satchitananda. But then, this Satchitananda could be something that is imperceptible, very difficult for ordinary minds to grasp, and therefore, from time immemorial, from one eon to the other, he decides to incarnate in a beautiful form. And Swami's beautiful form, in his own sweet words, he says, is the concretization of the devotion and penance of thousands of devotees. It is the deep yearning of the devotees that manifests itself in the form of the avatar. And therefore we have this beautiful form of Bhagavan, which is verily Satyam Shivam Sundaram. He has himself taken the name of truth or Sathya. And we all know this in our experience whenever we travel, especially when you're in India or you're in Bangalore, coming to Puttaparthi, Prashanthi Nilayam, and you see a vehicle in front of you that has a photograph of Swami or just these words, Om Sai Ram. How beautiful is that experience? Immediately, whatever problems we may have had during our travel, whatever apprehensions we may have had about how our time ahead is going to be, moment we see Swami's photograph anywhere, it could be our phone, it could be in the vehicle in front of us, a small shop here and there, wherever it may be. When we see Swami's photo or just his name for that matter, our entire mind changes. It is filled with goodness, auspiciousness. That is Shivam. Satyam, Shivam, and finally Sundaram. Swami, while he would walk out for darshans, he always had a mirror in his room, whether it is in Trai Brindavan or it is Prashanthi Nilayam. When Swami would come out of his room to give darshan, Swami always had a mirror somewhere nearby so that he would adjust his hair very finely, adjust his robe and all of that and look meticulously perfect before he would walk out to give darshan. So many a times it would happen that, Swami would adjust and then ask the students around how he is looking. On one such occasion, Swami asked the student, "Etla unnandra, how do I look now?" And the student very spontaneously said, "Swami, you look beautiful." Swami then corrected the student and said, "I don't look beautiful. I am beauty itself, Sundaram. I am that beauty that lends beauty to all of creation. That Sundaram that lends beauty to all of creation. And therefore the creation looks beautiful. That fundamental heart of this creation is Bhagwan. He is Sundaram. Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram is the very incarnation, the very form of Bhagwan himself. And possibly one reason why his biography is called Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. With this prayer to invoke Bhagwan present in all of us, as he himself has declared, Sarva Rupa Dharam Shantam, he has assumed all the forms. I bow down to Bhagwan present here in the form of all the devotees who are attending this satsang and all beings in the entire creation. In order to take baby steps towards understanding the practical spirituality that Swami has given us, in today's satsang, we will take up a technique, or I would say rather a few steps that Swami has described to us, using which we can place his teachings in a way systematically for us to understand what Swami has communicated to us in terms of what spiritual practice is. And these systematic steps as enumerated by Bhagwan are Chamatkār, which is miracle, that leads to Sanskār, which is acculturation, or to sow the seeds of culture in an individual. Then it is Parōpakār, which is generally understood to be service to others. And finally, Sākṣātkār, which means realization. So these four words that Swami gives us in his teachings will become the framework for today's satsang in order to understand through many personal experiences, anecdotes, examples and whatnot to explore the practical spirituality that Bhagwan has given us. To begin with is the first step, which is Chamatkār or miracles. Swami would always say that these miracles are nothing but his visiting cards. You need a visiting card of somebody whom you are not familiar with, isn't it? Those whom you know personally, whom you interact with regularly, you don't need their visiting cards. Therefore, for people who are new to you, possibly a visiting card would serve its purpose. And therefore, Swami says these miracles are nothing but his visiting cards for us to get introduced to him. While Bhagwan has many a time said that it is he who is actually waiting for the devotees. It's not like the devotees were waiting for him. The Lord, when he incarnates, eagerly waits for each and every devotee to come and be one with him. And therefore, that first step that he takes towards this is Chamatkār or miracles. In my own family, it happened like this. This is possibly in the early 1950s, and we belong to a Tamil family, and therefore our ancestors lived in the southern state of Tamil Nadu in India. And we belong to a particular sect called the Iyer Brahmins. So why am I saying this? Because the beautiful experience that happened, that brought Bhagwan into our life, that was instrumental to bring Bhagwan into all our lives, happened through this very sectarianism, if I can say that, in the sense that Tamil Brahmins, especially the Iyers, they are called the Shiva worshippers of Lord Shankara, and therefore they adorn the vibhuti on their forehead. And then there are other Brahmins in Tamil Nadu and possibly in southern India who are called the Iyengars. And these Iyengars are worshippers of the Vishnu form of the Lord, right? And therefore they have what is called as a tilak, that is a line that runs vertically on their forehead. So the vibhuti and the tilakam are the differentiating factors visibly to know if an individual is either Iyer or Iyengar. So it so happened that my grandfather's elder sister, I will call her my grand aunt, she was there in Tamil Nadu, and one fine day her neighbors who were Iyengars came with vibhuti on their forehead. So this is the 1950s, mind you, and therefore if we are to transport ourselves there, the systems were pretty orthodox, and for an Iyengar to sport a vibhuti is like next to impossible. And therefore she approaches her neighbor and in shock and surprise and says, how come you are wearing vibhuti on your forehead? So this neighbor smiles and says that the Lord of the universe, who himself has incarnated as Brahma, Vishnu and Maheshwara, the creator, the sustainer and the destroyer, the Lord who has taken up all of these forms and has come on earth, he is here as a young boy. And this young boy, who is an incarnation of divinity, materialized this vibhuti and gave it to us. This is the vibhuti that we adorn on our forehead. We see in him all the incarnations of gods and goddesses, and therefore we worship him. These were the words of the Iyengar neighbor, and this brought about great sense of inquisitiveness in my grand aunt, and she requested her to take her to the presence of this divine boy. And that's how in the early 1950s she went to Swami, and it was love at first sight, of course. As a result of that, slowly the women folk of our house became Swami's devotees. The men were not so much, devoted because they were very skeptical. They were busy with their work. So what would happen is, all the women of the house would cook for the men, keep their lunch, everything ready, ensure they go to office. And once they leave, they would pack up everything, lock the house, and quickly go for Swami's darshan and spend all their time in the divine presence of this young divinity that was manifest in front of them. So with time, they saw the transformation at home. The first bhajan mandali in that region was started. The first samiti in that region was started. And therefore, even the men began to join these activities, and slowly the entire family became Swami's devotees. Look at how Swami uses a simple leela of materializing vibhuti and giving it to an Iyengar to bring an entire family, to his fold. That is how Swami says Chamatkār or miracles are his visiting cards. Once they came into Swami's fold, another extraordinary leela of Bhagwan or divine sport of Bhagwan happened. This grand aunt permanently settled in Prashanthi Nilayam. She had no mind to go and stay anywhere in the world. For her, Swami was everything and Prashanthi was her home. So she came here and settled permanently with her children. In fact, her children had left whatever jobs that they were doing because they wanted to serve Swami. So they resigned their jobs, came here and began to serve Swami. In such a situation, it so happened that my grand aunt developed a health complication which even to this day we don't know what it is, because she wouldn't allow a single doctor to examine her. All that we know is her stomach was bloated. She was in immense pain. She could hardly even turn her body from this way to that way, especially on the side. It was on the right side, so we suspect that it could possibly be an appendicitis. But, we never knew about it. She was in great pain, and even in pain, when her sons would approach her and say, Amma, would you like to visit a doctor? Can we bring a doctor here? We need to do something about this. You are, severely in pain, and this is not how we handle the situation. And her response used to be singular each and every time. She would say, Swami is my everything. Swami is my doctor. Swami knows what to do. If he wants this body to go through this suffering, then it will go through this suffering. If he wants to take this body away, that is his choice, because this body and all of me belongs to Swami. That was her intense sense of devotion towards Bhagwan. She did not allow a single doctor to come near her. And what to do now? They all thought they will again request her and say that at least they would report to Swami that, she is in pain. But she negatively responded to that as well. She said, see, Bhagwan is the Lord of the universe. He is Sarvantaryami. He is the resident of the heart of every being in this creation. He knows everything about everybody. So there is no need for you to go and report to Swami what's happening here. He is very much aware. So if he wants to do something, that is his wish. If he doesn't want to do anything, I will happily give my life, which is dedicated to him. So these were her words. And it so happened that night, her complications increased and she was in such immense pain. She cried, calling out to Swami, Sairam, Sairam. Sairam was constantly on her lips. And what happened was she just, out of sheer tiresomeness, of fatigue that she experienced, she went into sleep and she had a dream. In the dream, Bhagwan appears there as if he is a doctor with all his equipment. And then he says, you are so stubborn and adamant. All your children are telling you to consult a doctor and you wouldn't. And you put all the responsibility on me. Now I have to come and do something. See, he says that, and he very graciously performs the entire surgery and then even stitches her up and materializes vibhuti and applies on the stitch wound, and the dream concludes. The next morning when she got up, she had absolutely no pain, and there was just a slight sense of discomfort, the region where the pain was earlier. And when she looked at it, there were these dried stitches marks. Can you imagine that? Overnight, Swami has performed an operation. Not just that, the stitches marks were there and they were dried up, which would otherwise happen after, say, a month or two, right? So that is already there, and there was vibhuti on top of it. And this Leela of Bhagwan not only developed devotion in all her family, including all of us, but it brought us closer and closer to Bhagwan. So therefore, this is just an example to show. I'm sure Swami relates in this manner with each and every one of you to bring you closer and closer to him. And I take this opportunity, as Bhagwan would say, to express my immense gratitude to the elders of our family. If not for their devotion, we wouldn't be here. It is their blessings and their sacrifices, their immense sense of surrender to Swami that brings us here. So it is our responsibility to thank our elders or whoever has been instrumental to bring us close to Bhagavan. So from Chamatkār, we move slowly to the next step of understanding Swami's teachings, which is Sanskār. So this also would be built based on another Leela of Swami that was an experience of mine when I joined the higher secondary school here in Prashanthi in the year 1999. So Swami had promised to the students that he would speak to us in the auditorium. It was an exclusive session only for the staff and students. Imagine the sense of excitement that we all were in at that point in time that Swami is going to give an exclusive discourse to us. It is like a massive personal interview. Massive because there were more than thousands of students. Therefore, it's massive. But then it's like a personal interview. So as time went by, we were waiting for Swami. All arrangements were made. Festoons were tied. The band was made ready. And as Swami came into the university auditorium in Prashanthi Nilayam, the band started playing. We saw Swami's car arrive, received with Vedam and wonderful chants and bhajans. As Swami got down from the car and walked into the auditorium, Swami's walk is so beautiful. He has the gait of a lion, yet the tenderness of a divine goddess, and both combined into one. And Swami would literally glide as he would walk. It wouldn't look like his feet are actually touching the ground, and that's how Swami was. On that particular day, however, Swami's walk was a little different. He was unfortunately dragging his feet, it looked like. And we were all shattered to see that. And we were praying to Swami to know what is happening. And slowly the information reached us that Swami's physical body was ailing with some disease which he had taken up onto himself. And this kind of worried all of us, wondering why did Swami take all this effort to come here? Swami must take rest and give rest to his body. But Swami wouldn't listen. He came onto the stage. He asked for the mic to be kept. His table was placed. The translator was ready. Swami stood there at the mic and hardly whispered. There was no sound coming out of Swami's mouth. What had happened was, Swami had taken up the disease of a devotee onto his body, and therefore he had lost his voice completely. The senior administrators at the university, at Swami's university, the vice chancellor, the registrar, the controller, who would get regular audience with Swami, they went and literally prayed and begged Swami not to come for this session, saying, Swami, it's our students. We'll inform them that Swami's body is unwell. They will understand. But Swami said, once I give word, I will not take a step back. And therefore, I will come and speak to the students. I have promised my students that I will speak to them. Therefore, I will definitely be there. These were the indications that Swami gave in his faint voice that he could muster physically. So, the administrators couldn't convince Swami, and Swami was there for that session. And standing there on the podium, Swami, in the faintest of voices that he could muster, he whispered literally into the mic and said, Devudu Shabda Brahmamayudu. God is the very embodiment of sound. Shabda Brahmamayudu. When he said this, all of us broke into tears. We couldn't, even hear this, though it was a whisper. And God is saying, standing in front of us, that God is the very embodiment of sound, Shabda Brahmamaya, and there was no sound coming out of his throat. And that broke our hearts, and all of us were in tears. In fact, you could hear the entire auditorium weep, and that's how intense that situation was. And what Swami did then was, he placed both his hands on the discourse table, and he looked at every single devotee, every single student seated there, and he looked at their faces for some time. Something in him moved, and Swami just looked down for a few seconds. He looked up at all of us with a sudden movement, and you won't believe, in the highest of pitches, in the loudest of voices, Swami thundered a poem after that. He had no voice few seconds before that. And Swami thundered a poem after that. I would take this opportunity to read out the English translation of the poem that Swami thundered. It is so significant here. I would like to quote Swami, but this is a translation. I quote, How does the sun rise and set day after day without missing a beat? How come the stars, the lights of the sky, hide only at daytime? How does the wind support the life of millions without resting a moment? How does river water flow all the time, laughing and gurgling? Wherever you look, how is nature full of creativity? And on earth, a diversity of status and riches, mindsets and species. Whose command is this? The Lord of all, behold. Unquote. So Swami, through this poem, declared that through whose command the entire nature, entire creation meticulously functions, that one, behold, that is Bhagavan himself, was there. So, he thundered this poem, and during the course of the discourse, Swami actually explained these events to us as to how he took up the disease of a devotee onto his body, how the elders in the administration had prayed to him and he denied their request. And finally, Swami said, I decided to come here. My voice was not coming. So the previous night, I sat in the bathroom and tried to remove the voice. I shouted out, ah, ah, in this manner Swami articulated and said he tried to remove the voice from the throat, but there was no voice that was coming out. Even then, he decided that having given a word to the students, I will be there. And he came there and stood. Then Bhagavan declared this. He said, I am not bound by any laws of the nature. Swami said this, I am not bound by any laws of the nature. Yet, I decide to follow all the laws of the nature when I have incarnated in a human form. But today, I had decided to meddle with the laws of nature and change something for only one reason. Swami, in fact, clarified that as an avatar, he never meddles with the creation and its laws. There was only one reason why Swami decided to change this situation, and that was the love of the devotees. When he saw the pure love in the form of the tears in the eyes of devotees and students, the heart of God melted. And then Bhagavan declared, if there is one thing that can melt the heart of God, that is the love of his devotees. This indeed is the Sanskār, or the culture that he has, the seed that he has sown in each of our hearts, the seed of love. And this seed of love is meant to sprout in us, and not just sprout in us, but we must become the channel of his love to all beings around us. And that is Bhagavan's aspiration for us. The practical spirituality that Swami teaches is when we say we love him, we must love him in all beings in the entire creation without any discrimination. This must be our constant sadhana, whatever may happen. And that is the seed of samskara that he has sown in our heart. Now, there is a beautiful aspect to this love. This happened in Trai Brindavan, which is Swami's ashram near Bangalore in Whitefield. The students were sitting around Swami, and Swami started playing with them with words. And he said, how many of you love me? So all the students raised their hand and said, Swami, we love you, we love you. Swami said, no, I don't think all of you love me. Then he picked one student who was kind of vociferous. He picked him and said, do you have a dog at home? He said, yes, Swami, I have a dog at home. So do you love your dog? He said, yes, Swami, I love my dog. So if the dog is happy running around, are you happy? He said, yes, Swami, I am happy. If the dog is sick and tired and it's unwell and it's not moving so freely, do you become sad? He said, yes, Swami, I become sad when my dog is unwell. Then Swami said, see, your love towards me is also like this only. It is not love, it is just liking, he said. Why? Because when Swami is unwell, you become sad. When Swami is happy and moving around freely, you become happy. But your love to Swami is only restricted to this much. So again, the students were, trying to protest against this and say, no, Swami, we love you. Then Swami clarified and said, see, do you follow your dog wherever it goes? Not when you're walking the dog, but in general, all of your life. So that boy said, he laughed and said, no, Swami, I don't follow my dog. I take care of it and all that. I don't follow my dog. Swami said, that is because you like it. To love is to follow. These were the words of Swami. To love is to follow, which means if we say we love Swami, we must follow his words, his teachings. His teachings are not different from Swami. Swami and his words are one and the same. Therefore, we have this wonderful opportunity not just to have the darshan of Swami through the beautiful videos and beautiful discourses that we hear through the media center, but the message that Swami is giving to all of us, that is very important, because the words of God and God himself are not two different things. They are one and the same. And therefore, Swami said, to love is to follow. That takes us to the next step of understanding Swami's teachings, which is called Parōpakār, which literally means serving others. But Swami brings out a beautiful meaning to this word Parōpakār. He says, Parōpakār, which means para, that is divinity, that which is beyond the body and mind. That divinity is expressed as para. Upa in Sanskrit means to be close, and kara means to do whatever activity is being done. So Bhagwan's definition of Parōpakār is split into three: para, upa, kara, which means the activities kara that take you close to God, upa, is Parōpakār. Therefore, any activity that you do that takes you closer to Swami is called Parōpakār. Now, how do we make our life like this? Very simple. Everything that we do in our day-to-day life must be transmuted into an act of worship to the Lord. In fact, I would like to quote the great Indian saint Adi Shankaracharya, a master of Advaita philosophy, who in fact sang in praise of Lord Shiva and Mother Parvati in what is called as Shiva Manasa Puja. He says, Atma Tvam Girija Matihi. He says, the soul is verily Lord Shiva. Girija Matihi. Girija is another name of Mother Parvati. So, Mother Parvati is verily the mind, Matihi. Sahachara Prana. All those servants of Lord Shiva, they are in the form of the life breaths that we have. Shariram Griham. This body itself is the temple of God, the residence of God. Vishayopabhoga Prasadaha. All that we partake through the five senses are verily the gift or the blessing or prasada of divinity itself. Sanchara Padayo Pradakshina Vidihi. As we walk around this world, that itself is going, circumambulating around God. You know, when many devotees come to Prashanthi Nilayam, they circumambulate Swami's residence through Nagar Sankirtan, or they circumambulate the beautiful Ganesh Mandir that is there in Prashanthi Nilayam in order to win the grace of God. But here Adi Shankara says, Sanchara Padayo Pradakshina Vidihi, which means your very footsteps that you take in your day-to-day life, your act of walking, that itself is circumambulation of the Lord. Why? Because there is no single spot where the Lord is. The Lord is present everywhere. And therefore, wherever you walk, it is like circumambulating Him. With this feeling, if we transform our life, he says, Yad yad karomi tad akhilam shambho tavaradanam. Which means, in this way, when I transform my life with this understanding, whatever I do in my life becomes a worship unto thee, O Lord, he says. So in this manner, Swami's teachings are precisely this. You don't have to exclusively do something different, extraordinary. What you need to do is whatever you do in your day-to-day life, ensure that that transforms itself into an act of worship. That transforms itself into an act of service to the Lord Himself. So how this can be done? A few examples for this. Bhagwan had, taken a huge entourage of devotees to the sacred shrine of Badrinath in the northern India, which is there in the Himalayas. And on his way, there is this place called Devaprayag. many of you must be from India, and many of you are aware of the Himalayas and India and its sacred culture. So I would request you, whenever you have time, you must visit Prashanthi Nilayam and also see these wonderful, I would say, repositories of divine wisdom, divine love, and devotion. So Swami himself had traversed that path in order to bless the devotees, in order to reconsecrate many of these shrines. So when Swami did that, as he went towards Badrinath, he stopped at a point called Devaprayag. This is a confluence of two rivers. One, the river Ganga. Actually, the name Ganga, you must be aware of the sacred river Ganga. The name comes from the point called Devaprayag. Before that, there are two different streams that confluence there. One is coming from the source of Ganges, which is called Gangotri, and there her name is Bhagirathi. And the other river is coming from the Kedarnath and Badrinath shrines, and therefore they are called Alaknanda. These two rivers, Bhagirathi and Alaknanda, confluence at this point called Devaprayag, and from that point, the sacred river is called Mother Ganga. And Bhagwan, when he went there, he had told all the devotees, I want all of you to have bath there. So much later, this happened around 2013, some 108 of us from Prashanthi Nilayam and Vrindavan, and those of us who are serving in Swami's institutions, along with our family, we had made this sojourn, retracing Swami's footsteps to the Badrinath shrine. And on the way, we discovered that Swami had asked the devotees to go and have a sacred dip at this confluence. The reason this is being done, there is deep inner significance to this. If you see, the two rivers are massive, gigantic by themselves at the point of confluence. They have their own legends, they have their own extraordinary nutrients that they carry from the herbs of Himalayas. All of that, their grandeur, their name and fame, all of that they carry and come up to this point. And what happens at this confluence? Both the rivers, Bhagirathi and Alaknanda, give up their identities, give up what they were till now, and become one river to serve humanity as Ganga. You see? And that is what lends sacredness to these various points of confluence of rivers, because the rivers are willing to give up their identity, their individuality, their achievements in order to become one to serve all of humanity. That is real Parōpakār. And that brings sacredness to this spot as well. And Swami had also mentioned that in his previous incarnation as Sri Rama, Sri Rama had done penance at this very spot. So we went there to take a sacred dip. And it so happened that one elderly who accompanied us, he started filling buckets and asked us to chant Vedam. As we were chanting Vedam, we thought one by one we'll go and have a dip. But this elderly devotee of Bhagwan, he filled waters from the confluence and started pouring on our head. And I was startled, and immediately I was wondering what is happening. But I couldn't contest this because it was a very, very elderly devotee of Swami. And therefore I submitted to the situation and prayed to Swami for an insight as to why this is happening. And there was a beautiful insight that Swami says that each of our body is a temple of God. In Sanskrit it is said, Deho Devalayo Prokto Jivo Deva Sanatanaha, which means every body is a temple of God, and the inner resident of the sanctum of this body is verily divinity itself, Bhagwan himself. Therefore, this body is Bhagwan's temple. And therefore, this elderly devotee was pouring the water on this body as if he was bathing the Shivalinga of the Lord, or a symbol of the Lord, or a temple of the Lord. With that feeling, he was doing this, and that woke us up to this awareness that every day when you shower at home, don't consider it as an ordinary act of cleansing the dirt from the outside of the body. It is actually a beautiful act of giving abhishekam to Lord Shiva or Bhagwan himself. In whatever way you relate to Swami, imagine the body to be a symbol of that divinity. And Therefore, when you shower, know that this is actually a abhishekam, a sacred offering that is being done, cleansing activity that is being done to a symbol of Bhagwan himself. When you do this in this manner, you will see that your everyday life will slowly transform into an act of constant worship to Bhagwan. And not just this much, there is another beautiful experience with regard to how your daily activities can be transformed into Parōpakār, that is, activities that take you close to divinity. This happened in the city of Chennai in southern India. Swami had gone there for Atirudra Mahayajna that was being conducted. Along with that, Swami was also invited by the government to be felicitated for the water supply project in Chennai. Swami had provided drinking water to millions in Chennai who otherwise were suffering without clean drinking water. So when Bhagwan went there on that occasion, he had taken a few students along with him to give speeches or to sing songs. Some of us who were there had this wonderful experience with Swami. Swami was seated in his dining room in Swami's ashram in Chennai called Sundaram. Swami was seated. The way the food sessions would happen would be that everything would be served on Swami's table. On Swami's plate, however, Swami would take very, very little of everything, or some things, I must say. Many of them he would bless and send it to the devotees who have very lovingly offered it. He would take a little bit so that they consider it as a prasadam. But what Swami would eat was very little. In fact, Swami would take a chapati from his plate and show all of us. He would say, "See how you all are eating? So much of rice and so much of chapati. My chapati is only this much. His size would be this much. And one chapati or two chapati at best." And that he would have with little bit of some sabji, some curry or, a chutney. So that's how meager that Swami would eat. But then the process of what used to happen there was extremely divine and beautiful. So the food would be served for Swami. The food would be served to all the guests and the students who are sitting there. And we all would eagerly wait for Swami to indicate to us. When Swami indicates, we start chanting Brahmarpanam. As we chant Brahmarpanam, Swami would, very poignantly listen to the chant. And then he would take the first morsel, right, indicating Brahmarpanam. He would take the first morsel, and then that would be a signal for us to start having the prasadam of Bhagavan as well. So this was the normal procedure. But one particular session was extraordinary because all of this happened. Food was served to Bhagavan. It was served to all of us. And Swami indicated, we all chanted Brahmarpanam. The food prayer, as you know, literally means Brahmarpanam. We are offering this food to God. Brahmahavir Brahmagno Brahmana Hutam, which means this is not an ordinary offering. This is a yajna by itself. It's a sacred sacrifice or a yajna by itself. And this yajna, the sacred fire is God. The yajna kunda is God. All that is being offered in this is also God. And therefore, one who is awakened to this reality as this yajna of consumption of food is happening, one who is awake to this reality verily attains the state of samadhi. That is what is the last statement where we say Brahmaiva tena gantavyam Brahma karma samadhina, which means the one who is having the awareness that this is a yajna which is completely offered to God and all its ingredients are God himself, attains the state of equal mindedness. And then Bhagavan says, when you do it in this manner, the reply comes from the divinity within. Aham Vaishvanaror Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashrita. I am the divine digestive fire present in all beings, and I digest all the 4 types of food that you eat and ensure that the nourishment reaches this temple of God, which is the human body. So this is all practical. You see, this is happening in our body. As we eat the food is getting digested by the digestive fires and the nutrition is distributed, and that is what forms this human body, which is a temple of God. So what these ancient scriptures tell us are practical truths which Bhagavan has highlighted, elucidated, and made it very simple for us to practice. Coming back to the experience, what happened was everything was ready. Swami indicated, we chanted Brahmarpanam, and then something wonderful happened. Swami is not taking his first morsel because that was an indication for all of us to start eating. And Swami is looking at us and telling, please have, please have. So we were not in a frame of mind to do this. Without Swami having, we couldn't start. So we prayed to Swami and said, Swami, mundu meer teeskondi Swami, tarvata mem teskuntamu. First you please have this, then we will consume after you. And Swami was adamant. He said, no, you all have first. So we looked towards our elders to convince Swami. They also pleaded with Swami and said, Swami, if you don't take the first morsel, the students will not eat. We also will not eat. So please have the first morsel as Brahmarpanam. You know what Swami said? All of you chanted Brahmarpanam, isn't it? What is the meaning of that? The food that you have in front of you, you offered that to Brahman or Supreme Divinity. All that food has reached me, Swami said. All that food, when you said Brahmarpanam, has reached me. I am full now. How much more can I eat? These were the words of Swami. All the food that you offered to divinity has reached me. I am full now. How much more can I eat? So please remember, every day when you chant Brahmarpanam before partaking the prasadam of Bhagavan in the form of food, please remember that when you say Brahmarpanam, it reaches Swami. And therefore, what you're eating is not some food that your tongue likes or some food that satiates your hunger. It is the Mahaprasadam. It is the greatest gift of blessings from God. It is something that God Himself has partaken, and we are having the good fortune to have that, and that gives us His energy, His gift of blessing, gives us the nourishment in the body to do the entire day's work. Now imagine if your spirit is transformed, if your attitude is transformed in this manner, how your entire day would be. Because the energy that functions through your body is His energy. And therefore, how the entire day's activity would then transform. Imagine this and see, this is practical spirituality that Bhagavan wants each of us to practice. So one technique is how you transform your daily bath or shower into an abhishekam of the Lord, holy, sacred worship of the Lord. How you transform the eating that would happen once, twice, or thrice a day anyway. But it is not ordinary eating. We can transform this into an act of yajna itself. In fact, in the ancient Indian culture, the yajna kunda, that is, you would have seen the base in which everything is offered in a sacred sacrifice, in the sacrificial fire. You would see that there are 3 steps to it, right? And actually it is not 3, it is 3.5. The reason is they usually do it on earth. Therefore, there are 3 steps constructed on top, and there is half a step that is dug into the earth. Why is this so? Because it is said that the human body, from top to toe, if you see, is 3.5 times the length of our hand. In Hindi, they say, 3.5 haath ka sharir, which means the human body is 3.5 times the length of our hand, right? For a properly symmetric human body. So, what the sages did was, the human body is not a human creation. It is the creation of the divine, isn't it? Therefore, they replicated God's creation, which is human body, in the form of a yajna. And how did they do that? They made 3.5 steps to signify the dimension of the human body. Then the fire that is sacrificial fire that is generated in the yajna is actually done through a natural process of friction. You can't use a matchbox or you can't use a lighter to do it. It is not done that way. How a yajna is done is they actually have 2 surfaces or 2 pieces of wood which is churned so vigorously that the friction produces fire. That naturally produced fire is what is kept placed as a sacrificial fire in a yajna. And why it is done this way naturally? It is to mimic the human body. In the human body, the fire of digestion naturally ignites, isn't it? Every time we have food, after 4 or 5 hours, what happens? We feel hungry. We see a burning sensation in the body. If you delay your food, the whole body gets heated up. Heat is the effect of fire. Therefore, the digestive fire that is there in the human body is naturally lit. And therefore, the Yajna Kunda also has a fire that is naturally lit. So people may understand that Parōpakār means to do yajna, no doubt. The sacrificial fires purify the environment, fill them with divine vibrations. But then we forget this fact that the sacrificial fire was made out of the human body as an example. Why? Because the fire, sacrificial fire and the yajna is a creation of man, but the human body is a creation of God himself. And finally, what is offered into this yajna? Only the purest of substances is offered. They say the fault between a good practitioner of yajna and bad practitioner of yajna and the results thereafter. There were great rishis and munis who were practitioners of yajna in a proper way, who won the grace of Lord Sri Rama in the Treta Yuga, as it is said. But the bad practitioner of the yajna was Ravana. Why? He would throw non-vegetarian items, that is, he would sacrifice animals and throw into that. He would throw alcohol into that yajna. The result was complete annihilation of his kingdom. Nobody was left. In fact, as it stands today, the entire landmass, it is said, has submerged completely except for a small piece of it, which is in Sri Lanka today. The reason being that his wrong ways of doing this yajna is symbolic to show led to the entire destruction of his clan. But those great sages who did it in a sattvic way, in a pure way, in a beautiful way, earned the grace of Sri Rama and redeemed their life. This example is to show that this yajna was created after the body, as you have understood now. So therefore, what we put into this yajna, which is a direct offering to Swami himself, must be the purest of substances. We must ensure that no non-vegetarian or no alcoholic substances are ever introduced into this body. It is only then that we can live up to Swami's declaration that this body is his temple. Right? So this yajna is an activity that we do every day, the food that we partake every day. Another funny incident that happened with the food was also illuminating. So we were in another session in Chennai, we were sitting around Swami and we were all partaking food after Swami had consumed the first morsel. And it so happened that there were only 6 out of 13 of us in the room. So the reason was the room had limited space. So 6 of us used to sit for one session. The next session, the other 7 of us would replace us. And we would alternate these sessions in this way so that all the students who accompanied Swami would get a chance to be with Swami during the food sessions. So one such food session, Swami looked at us, knowing very well it was his Leela or his divine sport. He said, "Why are there only 6 students here? I brought 13 of you." So immediately one of us submitted our prayer to Swami and said, "Swami, because there is limited space here, 6 of us are here, 7 of us are downstairs, they have made another arrangement there. So food is being served there." Swami said, No, it is not because of limited space. I know you boys very well. You all want to loudly talk when you're eating. You all want to eat how much ever you want, gluttony, how much ever you want, without any limits. But you know what? These are Swami's words. I'm reiterating it. Swami said, but you know what? In Swami's presence, you will only take as much as you want. In Swami's presence, you will eat in silence. These were the words of Swami. So if you take these words of Swami and convert this, or you look at the corollary of this, in Swami's presence, we eat in silence. In Swami's presence, we take only how much we need. So therefore, in order for us to experience Swami's presence whenever we partake food, first we must consider this to be a Brahma Yajna, a Sai Yajna, which is being an offering to Bhagavan himself. And then the items that are being placed there must be pure and clean as much as possible. We chant Brahmarpanam to purify the food because, as it is said, as is the food, so is the mind. And therefore, the purity of food directly reflects in our thoughts reflect in our action, therefore in our habit, and hence the destiny itself. So if we want to change our destiny, it starts with food in a sense. So we must purify the food with Brahmarpanam and we must eat in silence. Because Swami said, in my presence, you eat in silence. In my presence, you eat only how much you need. So if we cultivate these simple habits, daily habits, but transform them with these attitudes, our life will transform into worship, as Adi Shankaracharya himself did to his life. So there are various such ways in which Parōpakār or Parōpakār can be done. But because the general meaning is that of service, I will give one example of how Swami has taught us to do service. This happened during the Gram Seva, which Bhagwan had initiated in the early 2000s. And one day, when the Gram Seva activity was wonderfully going on, the students would go to the villages and serve Bhagwan's prasadam lovingly at every doorstep. It was such a blissful experience. But in order to enhance this service activity further for our own benefit, Swami called the elders who were responsible for the organizing of the Gram Seva, and he told them this. Bhagwan said, see, when you go to the villages and serve, always chant this, Om Satchitanandaya Namaha. I'll repeat this, what Swami had asked us to chant then. Om Satchitanandaya Namaha. And Bhagwan explained. He said, my true form is Satchitananda. Therefore, the one who is serving is also Satchitananda. The one who is receiving the service is also Satchitananda. The act of serving and whatever is being presented, all of that is divinity or Satchitananda. So you must have this awareness that it is Swami who is doing the service, it is Swami who is receiving the service, and the act of service and all that is offered in service, all of it is just Swami, Swami and Swami alone. To bring this awareness, Swami said, remember this, to chant Om Satchitanandaya Namaha. In this way, the entire activity, sacred activity of seva can be converted into sadhana. And most importantly, the idea of a giver or a doer is completely eliminated in this, which is the very essence of spiritual sadhana, the practical spirituality that Bhagwan has given us. From here, Parōpakār, activities that take us not just close to God, but makes us eligible to win the embrace of Bhagwan himself, which is the last aspect called Sākṣātkār. Sākṣātkār is when the devotee loses himself or herself in their object of devotion, which is Bhagwan himself. So I'm going to just narrate a simple experience of one of our music college teachers, which is such an enlightening experience. This happened in the interview room. Swami had called this teacher and few others for an interview. And as they were seated there, Swami asked them a question. He said, do you know who Subhadra is? So they all said, yes, Swami, we know who Subhadra is. Subhadra is the sister of Bhagwan's incarnation as Lord Krishna. Krishna's sister is Subhadra. Subhadra was also the wife of the great warrior Arjuna, who received the Bhagavad Gita from Krishna. So they articulated all of these to Swami. But Swami then said, do you really know but who Subhadra is? Let me tell you a story. And Bhagwan began to narrate the story. And I request your attention to carefully listen to this story. So Swami said, one day, Lord Krishna called Arjuna to his presence and told him something. He said, go and tell Subhadra that I am saying this to her. Take her to the banks of Yamuna and leave her there. Krishna's instruction to Arjuna was, take Subhadra, tell her I have instructed thus, take her to the banks of Yamuna and leave her there. She will know what is to be done. But one condition, O Arjuna, when you leave her on the banks of Yamuna, and you return back to your chariot, you are not to turn and look at her. When Krishna gave this very, very difficult and strict instruction to Arjuna, Arjuna, who had submitted himself to Krishna, had no choice but to obey. So he took his chariot, brought his beloved wife Subhadra onto the chariot, and went to the banks of the river Yamuna and told her that Krishna had asked me to communicate to you that this is your last and I am leaving you here. What this signifies for those of you who may not understand this is those days they were having this capacity to what is called as consciously leave their body, and typically they would do in a river so that they would not cause any discomfort to anybody else. So this is called a Jala Samadhi. So they would submit the body into the waters and they would willfully leave life out of the body. And that is what was being instructed to Subhadra. And she understood this just in a single word of Krishna. That is how intimate she was to Krishna. So Krishna had instructed this. Arjuna left her there with a very heavy heart, leaving his beloved wife Subhadra there. He was returning to the chariot. Every step was almost impossible for him to take. But suddenly, out of his immense attachment to his wife, he forgot Krishna's instruction and turned around and saw. And what he saw startled him completely, because he saw his wife in a yogic way, enter the waters of the river and leave the body. But Arjuna himself, being a great yogi, he could see what was happening, and he saw a demoness emerge from that body and leave. And this sent shivers down his spine. So he ran back to his chariot, and as fast as possible, he summoned the horses to reach Krishna's palace. And when he went to Lord Krishna's place, he was so shaken up. But Krishna, looking at him, simply asked this question. All this is Swami's narration. So Krishna asked him this question: why did you turn back when I clearly instructed you not to turn back after leaving her there? So he said, Krishna, please forgive me. I was not in a frame of mind to remember your instruction at that point. But tell me one thing. What I saw, what was that? My wife was actually a demoness? How can this happen? And your sister is a demoness? How can this happen? Subhadra was such a wonderful being. How can she be a demoness? So these questions were plaguing Arjuna. So Krishna gave his mischievous smile and began to explain the situation. Krishna said, in Swami's previous incarnation to Krishna, as Sri Rama, we all know the story of Mother Sita being abducted and kept in Ashoka Vatika in Lanka. Even today, they say that the sacred spot is there where Mother was seated. So in that Ashoka Vatika, there was only one lady who would take care and serve Mother Sita. And that was a demoness by name Trijata. This Trijata was the daughter of Ravana's youngest brother, Vibhishana. So Vibhishana's daughter Trijata was serving Mother Sita, while everybody else around there, those demonesses, they were there, they were all servants of Ravana. So all the time Trijata would be with Mother Sita, and therefore all that she would hear was about Rama. Mother Sita would describe how beautiful Rama is, how charming Rama is, how he would speak to his elders, how he would speak to his teachers, how he would treat young children, how he would respond to the despondent, all the facets of Rama which we have been fortunate to experience in Swami, and we continue to live to experience by listening to Swami's Leelas and the way that he has inspired all of us. It is the same way that he lived as Rama as well. Beautiful, he is Satyam Shivam Sundaram himself. So all those descriptions were taken deep into the heart of Trijata, who fell so much in love with Sri Rama. She has never seen him physically at that point in time, but she is so much in love with the form of the Lord and as Rama that she all the time was only thinking about Rama. She was yearning for Rama. After Ravana was vanquished and Rama was to receive Mother Sita, it is said that Trijata was the one who brought her to Rama's presence. And at that time, this demoness Trijata, the daughter of Vibhishana, for the first time she has the darshan of Sri Rama. Imagine if somebody only heard of Swami and they are so much in love with Swami and they have a darshan of Swami, what that feeling would be. That was the same situation in which Trijata was. When she saw Rama, her heart erupted like a volcano and a prayer took its shape. And the prayer was, Swami, I want to be with you. Rama, I want to be with you, either as your wife or as your sister. And this prayer was so intense that Rama had to respond to it, because there was a lot of seva that she had rendered to Mother Sita that made her eligible for this boon to be conferred onto her. So Rama saw that she had enough of satkarmas or favorable actions that gave her good merit, and therefore her prayer needed to be answered. And Rama internally, the prayer was internal from Trijata, Rama also in his heart conferred this blessing on her that it would happen as she has desired. So coming forward to the next eon, when Rama from Treta Yuga to Dwapara is in the form of Krishna, it so happens that Trijata was born as the sister of Krishna, and eventually she went on to marry Arjuna. There is a divine secret here which Swami didn't mention in the interview room, but just to give you the context to this, it is said that Lord Narayana, or the universal form of divinity, had taken incarnation in the sacred shrine of Badrinath in two forms, as two mendicants, rishis, and the rishis were called Nara and Narayana. They had come for a specific purpose, which is a subject for some other satsang, but they had accomplished their purpose. And this rishi called Nara, which means man, literally, was doing his penance on Narayana. The rishi Narayana was divinity incarnate in its fullness, and therefore he was always contemplating on himself. That is, he was in his self-established bliss. So Rishi Narayana was pleased with the penance of Rishi Nara, and he blesses him, saying, whatever you ask, I will give you. So Rishi Nara prays to Narayana and says, I want you to be my charioteer. He meant both literally and also spiritually. So Lord Narayana says, I will definitely confer this boon on you. And it so happens that this incident of early Treta Yuga manifests itself in the Dwapar Yuga, when Rishi Narayana was born as Krishna and Rishi Nara was born as Arjuna. They both were two aspects of the same divinity that incarnated as Rama, Krishna, and now as Shri Sathya Sai. So these two rishis, Narayana was born as Krishna, Nara was born as Arjuna. So they are actually, in essence, from the same source, which is the universal divine form of Narayana. So what happens is, when Narayana came as Krishna and Nara came as Arjuna, Subhadra, that is Trijata in her previous incarnation, had both her wishes fulfilled. She said, O Lord, Swami, Rama, I want to be either your wife or your sister, but I want to be with you. That came out very spontaneously for her. And look at how the divine plan happened. That same Lord, universal divinity, split itself into two incarnations, one as Arjuna and one as Krishna, and Trijata, who was born as Subhadra, became Arjuna's wife and Krishna's sister. And she was so intimate with Krishna as a sister that every thought, every action of Krishna, she knew very well that what her brother wants to convey. That is why Krishna told Arjuna, just tell her what I have said, she knows what to do. Because she knew her brother inside out. And Krishna also took care of Subhadra with great love and affection. But Swami added a but here in the story and said, see, but there was a problem. What was that? Why did then Subhadra, who took Jala Samadhi, return back to being a demoness? Swami then revealed and said, though Subhadra, and I want your absolute attention on this point, dear devotees, though Subhadra was in such close proximity to Krishna, literally living with Krishna, knowing everything about Krishna, right? in spite of that, she did not take Krishna to be her guru. Krishna, who is the Lord Himself, who is the Sadguru, the true Sadguru of the universe, she did not take Krishna to be her guru or her Sadguru. As a result, while she enjoyed the company of Lord Krishna, she did not do any sadhana in order to realize the teachings of Krishna in her own life. And as a result, all her good fortune or good karmas were counted away one by one as she spent time with Krishna. And finally, when her time came to leave the physical form, she had to go back to where she started from as a demoness Trijata. So all the penance that she had done gave her this opportunity to be in such proximity to God, Parōpakār. But then she did not take the next step towards Sākṣātkār, which is sadhana towards realization of self or realization of Bhagwan's teaching in her life. Swami then, after narrating this, Swami then looked at the devotees and said, "My dear ones, Meeru kuda ante," in Telugu, which means you are also like this. You have done immense penance, immense good activities in your many lifetimes, as a result of which you are here today in Bhagwan's divine presence. You know Him, you are able to be in His presence, you are able to serve Him. But if you don't make use of this opportunity to take Swami as your Guru and completely transform your life alongside His teachings as per His divine words, if we don't do this, then we may go back to where we started. So Swami gave this warning to the devotees in that interview and concluded the interview. What a profound, sweet warning, I would say, because this is not coming after everything is over. He's giving this warning to the devotees so that we awaken ourselves, one, to the good fortune of having known the avatar of Sri Sathya Sai, and to be living contemporaries of his incarnation. Not just that, it is an opportunity based on what Swami has told us through this experience that we must not waste this chance and transform our life to experience divinity through our humanity. This divinity must be manifest in us through our sadhana, and that manifest divinity must spread its fragrance in the form of love all, serve all. By loving all and serving all, that must be a natural fragrance that emanates from us, and that will only happen if we allow the sanctum of our hearts, which is Swami's residence, to take over us completely and allow Him to function through us in every single activity. In this way, not just our personal work, our professional work, our family, our relationships, everything is transmuted into divine work or Brahma Karma. So with these few words, I would like to take your permission and take Bhagwan's permission to conclude this satsang and thank him for making this instrument in his hand to communicate whatever he wished to communicate. I am grateful to Swami for this opportunity. I am grateful to all the organizers in the New Zealand Sri Sathya Sai Overseas Organization who are now part of the Sri Sathya Sai Global Council. I am very, very grateful to all of you elders, all of you dear brothers and sisters for this opportunity to share his love and his message with all of you. A loving Sairam and pranams to all of you.
Om Sai Ram. What a session, sir. I commend and congratulate you for your devotion, sir, your commitment to beloved Swami, and your ability to educate people in a very practical and simple manner. During the session, lot of questions were popping up in my mind. I was just writing them down in an order so that I can ask you questions later on. Though you have answered some of the questions during your talk, but I think I got a second thought now. I think we should hold on to this question for now. Maybe I should invite all the devotees who have listened to your talk. I will urge them to go back into the recording and listen to this again and again and reflect on the session. I believe that the true test will be to face the challenges and then determine whether or not we are able to put into practice the spirituality, the value that you have instructed us, imparted us today. I propose we should have another interactive section with you, sir, maybe very near future, where we can ask all the devotees to come up with a question and we can ask you to guide us about all the practical challenges that we may face during next few weeks. Sir, I am indebted to you for making the effort to speak with us, and I am confident that the information you have imparted to us will help each one of us to lead our life in accordance with Swami's instructions, and for this I am very thankful to you. We're looking forward to see you again for the interactive section where we all will benefit much, much more. Om Sai Ram.
Govinda Gopala Prabhu Giridhari.
हरे स्वामी सत्य साई हरे भक्त जना संरक्षक भक्त जना संरक्षक पति महेश्वरा ओम जय जगदीश हरे शशिवदना श्रीकरा सर्वा प्राणपते स्वामी सर्वा प्राणपते आश्रित कल्पलतिका आश्रित कल्पलतिका आपदान्धवा ओम जय जगदीश हरे मातपिता गुरुदैवमु मरि अन्तयु नीवे स्वामी मरि अन्तयु नीवे नाद ब्रह्म जगन्नाथ नाद ब्रह्म जगन्नाथ नागेन्द्रशयना ओम जय जगदीश हरे ओंकार रूप ओजस्वी हो साई महादेवा सत्य साई महादेवा मंगल आरती अंधुको मंगल आरती अंधुको मंगल गिरिधारी ओम जय जगदीश हरे नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण 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 ओम नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम जय सद्गुरुदेवा नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण 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 ओम नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम जय सद्गुरुदेवा नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण 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 ओम नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम सत्य नारायण नारायण ओम जय सद्गुरुदेवा शांति 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 समस्त लोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्त लोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्त लोकाः सुखिनो भवन्तु शांति 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 जय बोलो भगवान श्री सत्य साई बाबा जी की